This is Todd with Hex Press. Welcome to the RPG Breakfast Club chat for this morning. I am here with Glenn of Mystara fame and also Larry of Gamer Plus.
I'm Glenn Welch, better known as the Glenn or Mr. Welch, depending on where you know me from. I write the Welcome to Mystara and Mad Musings YouTube channel, and I'm also trying to get Mystara allowed back into 5th edition so we can start writing new books and new adventures for the classic setting.
I'm Larry, and besides gaming, I'm into music, and I spent the last weekend down in Little Rock with Carl at the Arkansas RPG Con. That was a lot of fun. And then this week I've been taking off on Carl's Heroes and Wizards game and writing a rules light system basically for me to run called Just Quest. That's my gaming stuff for the week.
Awesome. I remember, Glenn, you had put a couple of topics into the Prep Room channel. Do you want to pull one of those out and throw it out there and we can talk about it?
See what we got. When to listen and when to ignore playtesters.
All right. Well, that sounds very topical given that Larry's working on a game system. And and you obviously have been chugging through the Mystara stuff. So yeah, what is your, give me your take on that?
From a personal experience, I had a lot of playtesters because the book was rather large. And the things I've learned to watch out for is, one, watch out for players and their fetishes. Because some of them will give you stuff that they want to see, but something that's not necessarily good for the game. And then you do want, when they find, but don't be afraid to take criticism. If somebody finds a mechanical issue in the game, then listen to them. By all means, listen to them. Sometimes you want to try to do something not experimental or iconoclastic, or you want to try something new. And this was something that I experienced a lot because, like, for 5th edition, I'm not a fan of the barbarian class at all. And when I was trying to put together some archetypes, I made them fighters. They went against everything that 5th edition fighters were supposed to be. They were sneaky. They were light armored. They could turn on certain fighting styles. And those are usually in the realm of the barbarian. But again, I was trying to make them fighters, and people kept telling me, you got to make them barbarians. And they didn't understand where the concept was. But when they came out and pointed out, I was like, well, if you want to do this, you have to change this because this doesn't work by the numbers. And we had to, so then that's when I listened to them. When they find typos and stuff, when they find grammar errors, absolutely. But if they're wanting to tell you, like, well, you need to add more boobs, like one guy pointed out, or that this art is offensive, remove it because I don't like it. That's not really finding errors in the game. That's inserting personal opinions.
You have to have a good vision, and you just have to have confidence in that vision to say whether, one person or multiple people's playtesters experiences, if they're just their own and, you're okay to live with that, or if there's something that will affect that vision that you feel like you need to change. Because people, this happens all the time in any kind of media. People have all their ideas of what they want. Sometimes people don't really know what they want. I think that's a big thing that often comes up is you think you want something and then you get that and you realize then that's not what you want. So you have to be confident in a certain point that what you're driving at and what you want, and then being able to listen within that to get the kind of feedback that's going to help you perfect that vision, but not change it utterly.
Well, one issue that I had was I was trying to put together a privateer fighter class. I had to finally admit when the playtesters kept coming back at me saying, this doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And then finally somebody explained to me why it doesn't work. Saying that you don't like X doesn't really do me any good unless you can explain to me what's wrong with X. In the case of the privateer, there were at the time, there were no rules for ship combat. So it was a character class in search of rules that he could use. And so I finally had to strike it because there was no point in playing it if there was nothing that they could actually do with it. And then, of course, about a month later, as soon as I struck it, they came out with Saltmarsh and included all the rules that this thing affected.
I run Caves of Doom, a module. I haven't really done any playtest on my new system, but it's the mechanics, my playtesting of our modules. Vivian and I wrote the Caves of Doom, and what I found is that mostly, afterwards, you ask for comments and stuff, and Mostly they go, oh, it was fun, and that's, of course, that makes you feel good, like you did a good job and all that. But I find that my most valuable playtesting knowledge that I gain is from just the overview. In other words, watching them, how they respond to the scene, how they respond to the maps, how they work out the puzzles. If there's something that's too hard, then maybe it needs to be adjusted. Also, I find I catch a lot of little errors where I've got the stats wrong. I got armor class low instead of high or something like that. And then that kind of breaks the continuity because you have to figure out what I did wrong.
I mean, that's why having, proofreaders and editors is necessary, because you just become blinded to the stuff that you wrote. Even if it's not necessarily written correctly, sometimes your mind just fills in what you know it's supposed to be, and you just pass over what was. I think the thing with feedback is it's kind of a challenge to get, right? Because people don't usually want to tell you something was not to their taste or to their satisfaction, unless maybe it's particularly face to face, unless it's really bad or really they hated it, and then they want to tell you they hate it, or not. But I think a lot of people who falls into maybe the middle 70 or 80%, they're just going to tell you, oh yeah, it was great, it was fine, and then in their own minds they're like, well, I didn't like this or I didn't like that, but they might not tell you. I think that's a lot in any kind of campaign or game. You don't tend to it can be harder to get feedback. I think you can fall into a little bit of a trap when if you don't get any negative feedback, you feel like, oh, well, there's obviously nothing wrong, or there's nothing negative about this because nobody told me so, when in reality might be that, well, they didn't tell you, but maybe that's not there wasn't anything negative. That's, I know I've seen a lot of worksheets and things with lots of to help getting kind of good, useful feedback, because just asking people what they thought isn't actually always a fruitful thing, unless you have, some really people are going to be really super brutally honest with you. It can be easy just for people to say, oh yeah, it was okay, right? And not tell you the truth.
Rule number 1 is never edit your own work. Well, for my playtesters, I used a mixture of people I know and got people I barely knew to get people I didn't know to playtest it, because a blind playtest is the most honest.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because you're playing with the group that knows you and knows everything, how you like to run it, knows how your game tends to run and all that. Yeah, they tend to, and they'll just swoop over those same blind spots you do, because they just fill in from their knowledge of you. But when you have somebody have to pick it up and try to play it and run it, and they don't know your style, they don't know the things you like to do, all that jazz, and yeah, you're going to get a much more authentic experience as far as somebody who might be picking this up off in a gaming shop or download it and then try to run it, and that's going to give you a much better idea of what's really broken or missing or incomplete.
And I've had players tell me that things that I thought were just placeholders were some of the best stuff that they wanted to play and wouldn't let me take it out.
When I'm out playing music, and it's the end of the set, nobody comes up and says, oh, I hated this or I hated that. They're all like, oh, that was great, I loved it, So you have to kind of be aware of the audience while you're performing. Same thing for testing. You have to be aware of your testers while they're playing. I know you have to also DM or whatever it is you're doing. But what would be really great would be to have someone else DMing where you're just watching, and not so involved in the game yourself, and then evaluate how the players are responding to different things while you're not having to deal with the situation.
Yeah, ideally you want to leave a sheet for them to fill out their issues and then turn that in. That way they're also not intimidated by you standing over them or knowing that they're watching them. The observer effect is a thing.
Yeah, I agree. Having a form, especially if there's specific things you want a response about, they may not even notice it, but whenever they see that form and a question's asked, they may have a response.
Yeah, there's definitely a science to those. I know I've seen some online to kind of help, because the wording can be important too, and how you phrase things and what kind of choices you give people how to respond. I think eventually you definitely want people to just blind, put out a beta version or hand it out and have some people run it in different environments to see how they do. One, when you're not there, they can be, free and open to do with it how they might do it in the real sense. Maybe maybe if you're standing right there and they want it and they're going to run your module, they may feel compelled to run it exactly as you have written in the book, which might not be at all how they would do it on their own. So, you don't get that kind of breadth of experience when a lot of people like me will grab a module and I may never run a module as it is in the book, pieces here and there and grabbing out of it. And that's just kind of how I run it. That is definitely one way to experience a module. And of course, some people do run it by the books. But I think being able to get all that out there and have people really get to it on their own and be able to experience it and not feel the pressure or weight or whatever of, the creator being there next to them and and not having the creator to lean on for playtesting at some level, at some point in the development, I think is pretty important.
Yeah, and that's and the other hard part is actually getting feedback. Especially now with the ability to email and stuff, it's like, okay, we ran a game. How did it go? I don't know. Nobody took notes. Well, that's not a good playtest, then, is it? Telling me what you liked is just as important as telling me what you didn't like. Because if everybody's picking specific options over something else, either those options are too good or the other options aren't good enough.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you got to get both sides of the coin. It's not just about the stuff that didn't go. It's also about that stuff that worked. You want to see the whole spectrum of how people reacted to playing the game.
All right. Shazam!
I was going to ask you, Glenn, what was do you remember, or you have on top of your head, what one of those placeholders that people just really took to? I was curious about that.
Oh, that was easy. The troubleshooter. It was a rogue archetype that had a massive focus on disarming traps compared to everything else. And it was one of the 2 non-com classes that I wanted to put in there to see, because, again, trying to push the envelope. And they didn't have any bonuses in combat at all from just their archetype abilities. But because traps are such a major part of Dungeons & Dragons, having somebody who specializes in traps was fantastic, especially since when I had written that part, the only option, there were no supplements out yet. So the only options were you could be a thief, you could be an assassin, or you could be a magic thief. And those were your only 3 choices. And then comes along the person who's like goes into the dungeon just to be disarming all the traps.
And it's interesting because I find that a lot of stuff I hear about 5th edition is people are not particularly high on traps, either using them or dealing with them, using them on the DM side or dealing with them on the player side. It seems like traps are at sort of a low point of usage in games. I think a lot of people just find that they're a waste.
The mechanics are clunky. The mechanics are very clunky.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Though I don't know. I mean, was there an edition you would feel like that the trap, what edition would you, I guess you point to and say, this is the trap mechanic that was good?
I would combine 2nd and 3rd edition where, I hate to say it, but give traps a challenge rating. The challenge rating system in 5th edition is wonky as hell. But if you're going to come across a trap and give it a challenge rating. So if they come across a simple pit trap, it's a low challenge rating. If you disarm the trap, you get 25 XP. That's fine. If you come across a trap that's like the turbo tetanus non-friction no stick trap from White Plume Mountain, that was a brutal trap that had multiple steps and required the party to work together, and that would give a lot more experience points.
Yeah, it's interesting with traps because I think you can give them. I mean, I don't even know how they work at 5th edition. I just assumed you would give them DCs now. I think it's existed with traps a lot is that you have this thing which, other than say a simple pit trap, you have this fictional stuff which is difficult to come up with, doesn't necessarily make sense in some situations. Given how do traps trigger and how do those triggers rearm and all that, and how do you explain the stuff about when you get into more complex traps? And then you have these maybe overly simplistic mechanics or lack thereof, where it's either you're using a 10-foot pole and you're just finding it, which I think for some GMs, not for myself, but I know some people get frustrated with that because they feel like, well, why do I have a trap here if you just have this stick, this pole, and then you find it? Or then why don't I always just have check for traps on auto and then I just find all the traps that are going, in which case, as a player, maybe I think, oh, that's boring because I'm just saying the same thing over and over again. Or as a GM, again, that's boring because they're just auto finding my traps and therefore rendering them useless.
The issue with 5th edition, 2nd edition had the problem was if you searched for a trap, it took 10 minutes. So it literally became a dungeon crawl. In 5th edition, because the passive perception is just broken, the way they've written it, they did it very badly. It's easy to spot traps because you just walk, oh, there's a trap, trap there, trap there. It's like, window shopping at Macy's. You just happen to see it. You don't have to actually search for these traps because if somebody maxes out or takes the feats and gets their passive perception up to ungodly levels, traps aren't a threat. And that's one of the reasons why they have kind of fallen out of favor because, okay, so I've got the turbo tetanus trap and it's DC 20 to spot. And then somebody goes, okay, well, I took this feat, which gives me +5 in my passive perception. I maxed out my wisdom. So I've got a passive perception of 23, so I automatically detect and probably avoid any trap that's DC 23 or less. That's boring. That's very boring. It takes away the exploration part.
I agree. I set up specific traps, deadfalls or whatever. And when they check for traps, I say, okay, what are you doing? Where are you looking? Oh, I'm looking up and down the crack of the door. Oh, well, when you look up here, you see a little string. What do you do? And if they're able to use that string to deduce what the trap does, or use it, pull on the string and maybe set the trap off, then that's disarming the trap. Not just roll, and if you roll over something, you disarm the trap.
Well, I mean, that's that kind of give or take with a lot of the skills, right? Is at what point do you rely on the roll of the skill? Because someone's going to say, well, I have it on my sheet, and I as the player don't know what that string does, but my 10th level rogue that has all this stuff, he knows what that string means. So therefore, that's why I'm rolling on the string. I think the other thing that comes up is that it forces you. I mean, it was fun when you had something like Grim Tooth's traps, where it had all the mechanics of how these various insane traps worked. So at least you could describe those. But it becomes that thing of, oh, there's a trap on the door, or you want to put a trap on the door, but you as the GM, you don't really want to or have a actual description of how it works. You just wanted to have a trap on the door. So, so when you get down to having someone to try to go through it, you're like, I don't know how this particular thing works. I just know that there was a trap on the door. I think one of the things that I've found is that in a lot of the modern games, essentially dungeons are one way. So you go through, you clear the dungeon, you don't even necessarily have to go in multiple times. You go all the way through, you get to the end, and then getting back out again and all that is hand wave. What I found with a lot of traps, even simple ones, is sometimes they're most effective not when you're going through the dungeon and you're spawning them and you're either opening them or going around them or doing whatever. It's that maybe you get into a situation where now you have to leave the dungeon quickly, and we're not hand waving the fact that you're trying to run out of this dungeon. And when you're running back out, sometimes you trip or fall into the traps that you avoided on your way in because you're running. You can't necessarily, you might rule, oh, that's, you have a disadvantage on your perception, which means that some of those things that you were spotting automatically, you're no longer spotting. If you weren't taking the time to map and make notes and then call those out, then you're not thinking of it because you're just in a mad dash for the exit. And now suddenly you're tripping over and falling into traps that you didn't the first time around.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why traps in 5th edition are kind of falling by the wayside. One, the auto detection makes them kind of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for, neutered. And then it's also very death light. It's extremely death light. So there's no more, okay, did you check the trap or the chest for traps? Okay, save or die. So there's little traps are a nuisance now. They don't do the multi-part traps. It's usually just one save and that's it. And you don't have to, and there's certain, the traps are meant to be disarmed. So you get the guy, he makes his high roll, and you can, if you max out your skills, which isn't hard, you'll get one guy that can just spot, disarm, spot, disarm, spot, disarm. And that's all he does. There's no risk. There's no danger. If there's no danger and there's no risk, there's no fun.
Oh yeah, I totally agree.
Me too.
There's definitely a few problems that have kind of come together to make traps just things that people just end up wanting to ignore. I do like them just from a atmospheric standpoint, raising the tension up. But yeah, it used to be that, you were deathly afraid at low levels of even a simple pit trap because that fall could just kill you. It's a lot harder to do that in 5th edition, right? Because even if the first guy falls in the trap and it drops him below 0, by the time he would spit out 3 death saves, I'm sure somebody's got the rope and has gone down and administered first aid or whatever. So even at low levels, the danger, though higher, is not quite as much as it would have been in lower editions where it could literally just kill you outright. And then once you get above that threshold, unless you're getting into really crazy traps, yeah, the danger is down to the point in which it's more like you're saying a nuisance.
To say it, but a lot of the luster on 5th edition for me is kind of worn off.
I don't think you're alone in that. I think it makes sense that the more people play, they're going to find stuff, the longer the rules are around for, the more, kind of nits that are going to get picked on it until you find the ones that really bother you. I'm not sure, for me, what I would change, but I think some of the stuff around what is skill-based versus what is descriptive and kind of what things are emphasized, I would definitely want to tweak myself.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm actually making a list of, if I was going to make a Gestalt 5th or a D&D game, the rules I would take from each edition. And that's actually turning into something that that's actually people are starting to enjoy, like being able to add skills to your characters, because in 5th edition, once you select your skills at first level, they're pretty much locked in place. You don't get any more.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I don't like. So what is your change? You're just bringing back giving a particular amount of skill points at level intervals?
No, I'm still keeping with the you because in third edition, you automatically just skill points were kind of ridiculous because you would just put them in skills you already have. So all you did when you leveled up was you raised your skills 1 point, and that caused the problem where, things became automatic again. What I did was I took the rule from Rule Cyclopedia that every so many levels, you pick a new skill. You automatically learn a new skill. So like at fourth level, I think fourth level is the one we used. You got your skills. Okay, now buy another one. You can pick any skill to learn that automatically. And then at eighth level, you get another skill. So your characters are advancing. They're learning more stuff.
Correct me there. Is it skills that come in at the same level as the skills you already knew, or do they start back at one? I don't remember.
In the Rule Cyclopedia, skills were tied to your stats. So you would come on as your percentage chance was your base stat times 5, because you had to roll under on a d20. So if you had a strength of 15 and you took a new strength skill, it automatically came in at 15. But if you raised a stat, it went to 16. So raised a skill rather, it went to 16. So people would buy the skills. And you could either increase one to increase the percentage chance by plus 5%, or you could just buy another skill. And in 5th edition, because skills are automatically raised by your proficiency bonus, if you get at like level 8, when you have, I think, a plus 3 bonus, if you get a new skill, it comes in as 3 because mechanically it's easier.
Yeah, I think I definitely could see something like in 5th edition. I would probably, maybe I'm just being sometimes they get too far in the weeds and this stuff. I think I would like that they maybe start a tier below what your other skills are. So when your skills, that proficiency bonus, maybe I'd have just have tiers for your skills. So your tier 1 skills are that beginner bonus. I don't know if it's plus 3, plus 4. And then, when you move your skills up one tier, when you hit that next level, if you pick up a new skill, that skill is now at tier 1 and your original skills jump to tier 2, something like that.
You're only dealing with a 5% point variance between 1 and 2, so it really it's minuscule on what you're on the difference, though.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I said, I hadn't done the math or anything on it.
Yeah, that was the one thing I've learned playtesting all this stuff and writing the games is if it's trivial, if it's like plus 1 or plus 2, don't worry about it. If it's plus 5, absolutely worry about it.
I don't really follow all the skills mechanics that closely or anything, but I like to think that a player character needs to put time into learning a skill. It needs to be part of their narrative.
I totally agree with that. That's why I like to use downtime for leveling up. In the games I run, you don't level up in the middle of a dungeon. You have to go and find a teacher, or if you know one already, go seek them out, spend some weeks, or depending on what level you are, and money and train up that way.
Yeah, you can. That's easy enough to do. I was just trying to address the fact that it was impossible to learn skills.
Yeah, I definitely don't like that your skills are kind of static in 5th. It would be nice if you could do it. Though I noticed in the recent Unearthed Arcana, they have some options. I think there's at least 1 or 2 for some of the different classes that apply to swapping out your skills at either a level up or at some interval. You can change your skills so to alleviate some of that staticness. It also makes everybody the same because they have all this, if you're the same class, you have exactly the same skills. It'd be neat maybe if they opened it up a little bit more, but there's not that many skills in the game as it stands.
There's 18 compared to over 30 in 3rd edition, and I think 60 in Rule Cyclopedia. I'm not familiar with 4th edition, so I couldn't tell you how many there were there.
I've noticed that 5e players spend a lot of time developing their character, sometimes more than one session, and they love that part. And maybe the lock-in is part of why they're putting so much time in developing their character before they ever start to play.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, character generation is a big part of the game now, and I guess it has been for a while. Certain 3rd edition was the same. And I think they've succeeded with finding this medium where I think for most people, not everybody, but for most people, there's enough things in there so they can really get in there. There's enough stuff and really customize that up where it's not too much to either one, have a bunch of dead end choices, which I think 3rd edition, 3.x, and I think maybe Pathfinder 2, they suffer from, is you can go down these rabbit holes and build these characters that end up not even just being not optimal, but really be poor and in a way that can really be damaging. Whereas in 5th, you don't have as many options, but all the options are pretty good.
3rd edition had a major problem with a lot of the early obvious choices you could take at level 1 to level 5 became obsolete. Like the cleave feat, which in 1st level, because you're fighting monsters that you can one-shot, it's great. Oh my God, you stab the goblin, now you get to stab the 2nd goblin. When you start getting to the higher levels, I guess 7th or 8th, one-shot monsters largely disappear from the game. And that was something that Pathfinder addressed by saying you don't have to kill the monster, you just have to hit the monster. And that was a flaw of third edition, was you had a lot of things that you would want to take early on, but then they became much less useful as you leveled up because the monsters outclassed the ability, or the odds of the ability happening at higher levels was radically less than what it happened at first level.
Right. And then you had to do something like, it just became useful only in that it was in the feat chain towards something else. So you go from cleave to like greater cleave.
Yeah.
So you would no longer ever want or need to use cleave, but you needed cleave as a prerequisite for this other thing. So you just kind of have it.
Yeah. And then greater cleave would become useless because, again, you'd have to one-shot stuff. And, or the scale was so small that there was it's always been a problem with the fighters in anything that wasn't Rule Cyclopedia, where their damage output completely was dwarfed by just about everyone else's, despite they were the fighters. Because you have one, when you're a fighter, you can attack. That is your option. You can attack with different weapons, but all you can do is attack. Third edition kind of gave you advantages, and this is something that I want to change for fifth edition, where you could get different types of attack. And the Rule Cyclopedia, you automatically learned new types of attacks and new maneuvers as you leveled up.
It's the kind of stuff that the Battle Master has, but that not other. Really, I think the Battle Master maneuvers should be a core fighter feature.
The Battle Master should have been the baseline fighter, not an archetype. Everyone should have been branching off from the Battle Master's abilities. So every so many levels, you learn new maneuvers. And I had a friend of mine was talking to me when we were working on making a Battle Master core fighter. And even somebody pointed out, like, we know why they have the problem with you can only use these maneuvers so many times a day. It's like, why? They're maneuvers. It's not like a spell. I don't forget how to disarm after I use it 3 times. And we came up with the wonderful mechanic of, if you use it, you can use it once per fight without penalty, but then everybody wises up to, you start to telegraph your move. So if you use it a second time, it's at disadvantage, and you can't use it 3 times in the same fight because everybody knows what to expect. Well, you don't throw the same pitch 3 times in a row.
For sure. I think the one thing that comes up, and I always struggle with this, and it kind of gets back to playtesting a little bit, is how much benefit for some crunch before, say, the tracking or crunchiness of it becomes too much. In other words, if we're doing a once per combat, or even that, it really, you could even just call it, just to use the 50 mechanic, once per short rest for a bunch of maneuvers, or really anything, then now those are resources that we have to track and note. And okay, I did it once, so now I got to mark that it's a disadvantage. Now I did it twice, so I can't do it again. That kind of thing. It becomes, there's a lot more tracking that goes into it, which some people don't mind and enjoy. And as I've said before in other podcasts now, I think with immersive things like Roll20, maybe it doesn't even matter that much, because if you can get it all plugged in behind the scenes, it can just, they can just go from different, the software can essentially track all that. And as a player, you just look at it and says, oh, it's white, I can use it fully. If it's gray, I can't use it. And if it's gone black, then it's used up, kind of thing. But, at the table, it just ends up being a lot of tracking that.
You're not really going to be using the maneuvers that much, because it shouldn't be that hard to remember in that combat, because combats don't last that long. How many times you've used disarm?
One would hope they don't last that long. I agree in theory. I think it's just one of those interesting things that, it's that give and take, right? You get this, because I think the idea is great. And I don't even necessarily mind the tracking. Everybody, it's weird, the things that people don't mind tracking versus that they will mind. Like, people don't want to track how many arrows they've used, but they, don't mind tracking spells or hexes or whatever else that they've used. So it's, it's an interesting concept of what the tracking people don't seem to mind, and then tracking that people mind a great deal.
Well, so they just don't want to run out of ammo.
Yeah, I think that is part of it. I think if you track ammo, then there's a possibility that you could run out of it, so that people don't want to run out, so they don't want to track that they're running short.
Yeah, I'm old school. I recover arrows. I don't mind tracking that. I hate tracking in general.
I kind of grew up with Twilight 2000, so I got addicted to the sheets that had little arrow ticks on them, or back then it was the magazines where you ticked off the ammo. But Twilight 2000 was a different beast because it was a survival horror.
Absolutely, but I love that. I love Twilight 2000, and I remember sitting there, and I remember trying to playing and having to try to find the gun that would match the ammo that I had, because I might run out of ammo for the guns I have. But then I had all kinds of other, I had tons of 7.62 NATO ammunition, and I'm trying to find a weapon because I got boatloads of 7.62. Let me just find a gun that can please fire 7.62 ammo.
Yeah, that's a game mechanic gone astray.
but in a survival sense, and kind of like old school D&D, right? That was part of it. It was part of it was when the last OSR game I ran was very much an exploration, and you're going out and my group, they would really plan it out, and they would buy all their gear and buy all the food and buy all that stuff. And to me, I like the feel that it gives, because it really feels like you're going out on an expedition. It encourages you to really look at it like, if I was going to go on a 3-month expedition out in the middle of nowhere, like, what do I need? What resources do I need to bring with me? What can I maybe find along the way? All those kind of choices, I think it makes them interesting. I don't find that I don't find that when you take those away, it makes the game better. And I don't even find that it's all that much tracking if you just set it up properly, but I may be weird in that regard.
During my playtest of Caves of Doom, in Wizards and Heroes, you don't list all your equipment. You are assumed to have what your character would probably have. So if you want something that's not your rations or your arrows, you have to specify it, but you don't have to make a big list of everything you have. And one of the players said, boy, she really liked that. She didn't have to do all that work up front.
So how did you guys determine what each class was supposed to have? Did you have like a little chart?
No, it's so rules light. It's so rules light. There's no rules on it.
So it's just an agreement between the player and the GM as to what.
Right. So generally speaking, the stuff that you assume they have a dagger, or you know what I'm saying, without them having to list that. But when the guy said, can I assume when I was back in town that I knew I might have to catch something on fire, so I got a jar of oil, then I said, nope.
Gotcha. I do like usage dice. I don't know if you guys have used or heard of usage dice, but it's kind of a nice midpoint between tracking. I think it was the Black Hack that came up with it first, but essentially you would go into town and you would you would use dice. So you might have, D20, D12, D10, whatever it is. And when you use something, you roll on that die that you have. If you think you roll 1 or 2, it drops to the next die size down. If you get to, a 4-sided die and you roll 1, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 or just 1, then you've run out. So you could just have basically, you could just you're basically buying which usage die you have of it. So you just have a few that you have a 4-sided die, and then there's a 25% chance at any moment that you run out. If it's D6, it's 16% chance, all the way up to, to D20, where it's a 5% chance you'll run out, kind of thing. So you don't really, all you have to do is track the die size, and then you're just rolling on that as opposed to tracking numbers. It's a very clever way of inserting some of the tracking mechanics without the full on detail of traditional tracking.
In some ways, kind of realistic for some resources too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like you got a bunch of them and you don't really recognize them until you run out, or you just kind of hit there like, oh, I have half as many, or now I have a quarter as many, or I'm out.
All right. Shazam!
Have you gotten any feedback on your Caves of Doom? What do people tend to say when they run it?
Well, so far only I have run, and I've run it 3 times. The first time with mostly people who had never played. There were, I think, 2 people who had played before out of a table of 5 players, and they were my family, and so of course they told me they liked it. But I could tell they were having a good time. Plus, my brother, who was Dungeons and Dragons illiterate, came and sat and observed because he was just fascinated by this whole idea. And then the other 2 times I played it, so far my most important feedback I got from my playtesting is that all 3 parties were able to solve the puzzles and find the treasure. So I didn't want it to be too hard. It's an entry-level quest. The funniest thing that happened was there is a magic dagger that's the main treasure, and it has an illusion on it where it looks like a ash shovel. And when you get into the kitchen, there's a bucket of ashes with an ash shovel in it, but the ash shovel is really the magic dagger. And so I was playing with my grandson Connor, who's 6 years old, and we fought our way back to the kitchen, and we all get into the kitchen, and he says, detect magic. He found the treasure. I don't know why he said detect magic, but something about that kitchen told him there was something there.
Very clever on his standpoint, or whether lucky or clever doesn't matter. So
lucky, it's the same difference, right? It just blew my mind.
If you hadn't done detect magic, how are you supposed to find what was the way to get the dagger?
Well, in the other games, they would start digging through the ashes and all that, and then someone would grab the shovel and try to shovel some ashes, and then they'd realize this isn't really shoveling, it's stirring, and then they would disbelieve.
Oh, because it was an illusion?
Yeah.
Okay.
An illusion cast on a magic item, so it's tricky.
I mean, players are funny like that, because and that's kind of the interesting thing you see when you
play test or you send things out into the wild is some people, there's the things you think are obvious that people will do, and sometimes people will do it, and sometimes they will do totally stuff that's not obvious for good or bad, like bypassing stuff that you feel like, geez, this thing is, you almost have a neon sign over it saying the treasure's here, and they'll bypass it. And then, there's just a shovel in a bucket of ash, and that's detect magic, and it's like, wow, how the heck did they even know to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, and there is no indication. I mean, it's just old kitchen, and there is a rift that goes up. You climb the rift up out, and it's where your smoke went out. So it's obvious why it's a kitchen, but it's just an old kitchen with a fire in the bottle, a fire in the middle, and an ash bucket and some jugs of stuff that's old and no good. And there's no reason to really think there's anything magical in that room or even any treasure, except that it's at the back and they hadn't found much treasure yet. So, they're on a treasure quest. They got to kind of, in the back of their mind, assume there's actually going to be some treasure in there.
Oh, that's great. Now, are you running this module? Is it just for your rules light system, or is it kind of OSR, generally OSR you can run it with any system, or how are you developing?
Yeah, I think you could run it in any OSR. But I've only run it with the rules light because that's all I run, because I can't keep up with all those rules. I'm a very unruly player.
So what do you do for things like skills in your rules light system? Is it just
roll against a stat?
Okay, yeah, I really like that.
Roll against a stat. Yeah, roll against a stat, and that the DM decides what stat. Or in the rules light system, there are also traits. There's 2 traits, and so if they try to do something that aligns with one of their traits, whether it's pirate or whatever, then they can get a plus. The DM just awards a plus on a roll and rolls against the right stat, and you get a plus because it's with your trait. Or if it's something that you would just expect, the blacksmith, if that's your trait, and you have to shoe a horse, okay, you shoe a horse. You don't have to roll. You're a blacksmith. You know how to shoe a horse. Yeah,
I like that a lot. Have you ever heard of a system called, I think, Barbarians of Lemuria? Yeah, Barbarians of Lemuria.
I've heard of it, but I've never played it.
Yeah, it had a similar system where you invested in essentially jobs you've done, and yeah, it had a very similar thing. If you have pirate and this is a piratey thing, then hey, go to it. If you have this and it's that, then you get it. I really like that. I think I think you can get a lot accomplished with the kind of roll under a stat, and just having a very simple kind of occupations or just sort of things you've done, sort of basic experience. I think it favors the players to get stuff done, which is nice, since most generally they're going to be rolling, if it's a D20 system, most stats are probably going to be at 10 or above. So it gives them a better than 50% chance usually of getting it done. So you kind of they have it empowers them a little bit to do stuff and have a reasonable chance of success. And you don't have to get bogged down into skill lists or anything, if you don't want to. It always, something with skills that always bugged me back in the day was, I think you get some like local knowledge, and you'd have to put all the sort of terrains or anything. So if you were a ranger, you pick, local knowledge, I don't know, whatever, woods. And then you never end up in the woods. It feels like you just have this dead stat, and you could never really predict where you were going to be. So you'd either be really knowledgeable in an area you never met. And I'm sure from the GM standpoint, if you picked correctly, then it felt like it was maybe more advantage than you wanted to give them on this place where they are. Whereas if you just had, hey, look, I'm an outdoorsman, and I'm just going to say that I have enough experience with different areas to just have a general outdoorsman skill. It kind of takes everybody knows that up front. It kind of takes the pressure off, and you can just enjoy having that skill if you have it.
I agree. I'm old school, as I've said before, and I mostly play at low level because, just like most players, getting a long running campaign going to level up into a high level is a rare, wonderful, but rare experience. And so I tend to avoid combat, and I try not to roll the dice a lot. If you're rolling dice, you can have bad outcomes. Whereas I play with a lot of players, and they're all, random encounter, fight, I mean,
there's definitely different approaches between the new school and the old school. I definitely come at it from the same angle as you, where as a player, I do not want to roll. I want to roll the dice as few times as possible, because that minimizes the chance that something terrible happens. I want to try to leverage as much as I can and not have to go to the dice. If you go to the dice, it's a crapshoot, and yeah, combat is the ultimate crapshoot. So you want to get everything you can in your corner, and hopefully you can avoid anything nasty. And then, you want to get it over with as fast as possible.
And with death in the game, you can go up against 3 goblins and roll bad and be dead.
Oh, absolutely. I had 2 spider. I got, I had a PC that was taken out, or I was running the game. I wasn't playing, but yeah, the infamous poison of just a small spider bite. They were going down the hallway. They didn't see these 3 spiders. They didn't find them. The spiders kind of drop on them, and they killed 2 of them. The third one managed to get that bite in. One missed save later, and down went the spider from the spider bite.
Close to a TPK on a spider bite.
I mean, they were close because they were not swinging well. I think it was 2 or 3 spiders, and there were 4 of them, and they just could not hit these guys. But the spiders were also rolling poorly. But of course, they just rolled well once, and then missed the save, and then down he went. The funny part was that I have my own poison rules, which gave them some leeway into trying to deal with it. So it wasn't save and you immediately died. It was like save and you're slowly dying. So the outcome was basically the same, but it might take you hours to die. But I thought that within that time, maybe they would try to do something like go outside and see if there's some kind of, where's the king's foil, and maybe we can stop it or slow it. But what's funny is they just dragged the poor guy out to the camp and then went back in the cave and just left him to die there, slowly just bloating up from this poison, which I thought was awfully cruel of them.
That slow to die is something I may add.
I'll shoot you over the rules I have. It's very kind of simple rules, but they added a lot of flavor. Why? To me, it's more interesting save and dying than just save or die. Because the guy just died right there. They would do that. But by having potentially taking hours to die, it leaves open that space of, to think about, or at least I thought they might think about, how might we save him since he's not just dead. But yeah, they were just like, oh, well, he's done. So we'll just drag him.
They were so used to save or die.
Oh yeah, they were like, we still got some torches left. So let's go back inside, and we'll just let him warm himself by the fire. So yeah, the poor cleric NPC they had left out there was just there to tend to him because he wasn't high enough level to have cure poison or anything like that. And then a couple of the hirelings just got to watch this poor guy die by the fire while the rest of the party was back inside trying to get more loot. It was funny and sad.
The wording I'm using is that you might recover if an antidote immediate, meaning you're not dead yet, but the next round, when it's your turn, you're going to be dead. But if there was no attempt, I don't know. In poison, I might add that slow poison. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll drop the link for you, and you can check it out and let me know what you think. It's very much an OSR type, so it's really just kind of simple. Just kind of adds just a little bit of extra flavor to poisons, and hopefully it makes it something that you don't. It makes you feel okay. Because I was actually a little bit when I rolled, because I think it was a random encounter that I rolled, and I saw the spiders come up, and a part of me was like, oh, this is gonna be like, because you could feel, I feel a little bit bad of like, oh boy, this is gonna be something that can go really badly for them, and it's just 1 or 2 missed rolls and they're dead. But having that little extra bit kind of made me feel for myself a little bit more justified. I'm like, yeah, okay, well, they got a chance. They can save the guy if they really want to. But yeah, they didn't really want to. So
they were sick of that guy. Well, one of the advantages of Wizards and Heroes and my new one based on that mechanic, Just Quest, is that rolling a character is less than 5 minutes. So if you're dead, fine, but you're not out of the game,
Yeah, that's an advantage of the OSR type systems, right? I mean, it's because it's so easy to roll up characters, and it ended up being okay because that character died, and then he ended up taking over one of the hirelings that they had grown attached to, because they were out on their expedition. So I was thinking like, well, I don't know what's going to happen between now and when you get back, but you guys had rocked up with several hirelings, one of which was a mercenary. So you could if you took over, they would just go from level 0 merc to level 1 fighter if you wanted, and they were fine with it. So it ended up working out fine for everyone involved. And it ended up being an interesting moment because it was the sort of a turning point in the campaign a little bit. Because I started rolling morale for these hirelings that were sitting around watching this guy die. And the guy who failed was the same hireling that character had hired. So when that character died, the hireling looked around and said, this sucks. They just left that guy to die. If they let their friend die, what are they going to do with me? So he took his share of what he thought was his fair share of stuff, and he took off. And so he turned into a bit of a minor villain because the party was pissed that the guy took off with some stuff. But I felt like on his side, he felt totally justified. His employer had died, and they just left him there, and it just had left a very bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah, would do that.
Which is why I love hirelings.
Well, somebody suggests, I thought this was a great idea, have, in case of premature party death, to just have a bunch of camp followers that guard the horses and stuff like that out on the outside, and then if somebody snuffs it, then one of those guys gets promotion.
Totally. I think that's it's a great thing. It's a great use for hirelings, I think. And again, going back to the tracking and things like that, part of all that leads you to bring hirelings along, because if you start looking at the logistics and you say, okay, you're going to go off on this expedition to this dungeon area you think is going to have full of loot, but it's a good couple of weeks travel away from this town or whatever. So you're going to go there with all these horses and things and everything. Okay, good. Now, when you go into the dungeon, who's watching the horses? Okay, well, now you need a guy to watch the horses. Okay, but now who's going to watch that guy and make sure he's safe? Okay, you want one or two guys to do that, and also to guard your loot. And okay, maybe you need somebody else to help find your way because you don't have a good tracker or outdoors person in the party. Okay, so now we have another guy. So you end up, just once you start planning all that stuff up, it naturally leads you to having like a small, like you say, like group of camp followers who are with you to take care of all the stuff so that you don't have to, right? And then you can just go into the dungeon, and then everyone else is just going to do the stuff around the camp, and that just leads you to having extra people around for if and when party deaths happen.
We always tied the horses up and hoped they were still there when we got back out, and that would be a roll, wouldn't it?
That's it. Leaving things to the roll. I mean, in the case of my party, they were good that they brought people because they did a couple of things that I thought were really silly, but they did it as they got to this cave they wanted to explore, and it was clearly occupied by intelligent people. Then they decided to make their camp right in front of the main entrance of the cave. I remember giving them like are you sure you want to do that? And they're like, oh yeah, it's fine. I said, okay. They hadn't checked for other exits. They hadn't checked for anything else. And they spent the entire time. It was pretty brutal for them because they'd go into the cave and they come out hurt and injured and tired. And then they would get harried all night by these other creatures who were coming out of other exits of the caves and trying to drive them off because they were like, you're right in front of our front door, basically. So if they had left their camp untended while they had gone inside, they would have been in really big trouble. So it was smart on their part to protect it as much as they did.
All right. Shazam!
I guess we finished off. I know we've wandered a bit, but that's the good part of conversation about the topic of playtesting. Larry, I know you had thrown a topic in the prep room chat. Do you want to pull that one up and give us your take on it? Do you remember it? Should I go fetch it?
He's got playing with scenery and miniatures or actual play podcasts.
Right. So which one of those is, or either one, Larry, does one of those tickle your fancy? Have something to say on one or more of them? Or Glenn, is any one of those? You have anything interesting? Any takes on any of those two? I have no experience with playing with scenery. I've played with minis off and on. I don't have a big collection of minis. I don't have any collection of scenery, so that part's totally foreign to me. But it always looks really cool when I see it, like looking inside the window of like a Games Workshop store, and I see all the basically big war game stuff out. It just seems really amazing to me. But I've never had the pleasure of using it.
I worked for Reaper. I have probably a metric shit ton of miniatures. I don't know. I mean, I don't listen to actual play podcasts. I'm really not. It's, for me, the joy is the playing of the game, not listening to other people play the game.
I will listen to some now and then. One, it's just I do find it interesting to see what other people are doing because I feel like I'm somewhat in my own bubble. We lost Larry. Maybe he's having connection issues. I find that I'm in my own bubble a bit about what people are playing, how they're playing. I just find that the things that interest me about the game and the way I think about it is sort of very much a product of my history with the game through the many years that I've been off and on involved with it. So I do have a lot of interest in how are people that are approaching the game from just a purely modern standpoint, or they're new or they're young, whatever, see it. So I like to see that, but I don't really watch them, religiously or as an ongoing thing. I'll just kind of pop in and out just to kind of check it out, see what the talk's about, that sort of thing. But I do find them interesting. I don't watch them, I will have them on in the background while I'm doing something else, but I try to just sort of absorb a bit about the play styles and the characters and all that stuff.
Yeah. And that's just, I don't know. I mean, it's to each his own. I've just never, somebody tried to get me to listen to Critical Role. It's like, I'd rather be playing the game, not just listening to it.
Oh, sure.
And I've played in podcasts. I've played in games that were broadcast, and it's just, I'm sitting there, like spinning dice when it's not my turn. And, it's really hard to do because it's the Matt Mercer effect. Let's be honest. He's got a lot of really polished, voice actors and professional actors and things like that. But like it puts out an impossible standard.
That is definitely something that people struggle with, and though I think people point out the positive impacts that it's had. It's definitely mixed, right? Some people said, "Oh, I played the game because I saw Critical Role and I wanted, or watched it, or listened to it and I wanted to do it." And then other people will say, "I had players come up to me and say, can you do more Matt Mercer stuff?" Or say, "I'm leaving your game because you're not like Critical Role enough," or whatever. So
it's got its good points and it's got its bad points. It's not the only way to do it, and it's not terrible. Like I said, there is no wrong bad fun unless it's underage children,
right? But it has, to your point, it has shaped somewhat of what people expect the fun to be.
Well, we expect D&D's popular largely because of the celebrities that have come out saying I'm a geek, and this country unfortunately loves its celebrities a little too too much. And that's looking at Vin Diesel playing an RPG. Oh, that's awesome. Larry's back.
He's back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We were just talking about actual play podcasts. I'm not sure. Did you want to talk about that, or did you want to talk about playing with scenery and miniatures?
Actual play would be great.
All right. So to recap, Glenn and I were just talking about. Glenn has not really. He's participated, I guess, in some actual play. I have not participated in any myself. I have listened to some on occasion, not necessarily as a rule. I think we were talking about the Matt Mercer effect, and that some of the actual play ones, the most polished ones, and I think Critical Role probably being the most polished one, can definitely set expectations that may be unreachable for other groups that don't have, actual actors playing their characters. But what did you want to say about actual play podcasts, and what's your experience with them?
At Gamer Plus, we've been experimenting with doing actual play right here on Tanker's Tavern instead of using a system designed for it. So we just do voice and text chat. We can post links and pictures in text chat and do the play. And we either roll our own dice. When we did Star Wars, the DM put up a dice roller, a link to a dice roller, because they have special dice. But we usually just roll our own dice like we're sitting around a table. And we have a file area and a whiteboard. So that all helps with like pre-gens or maps, and that's been working pretty good. And we so far have not got a good recording, and we're not really that concerned about whether it's a great podcast like some of the pro ones. We're more into the actual play, and the podcast is kind of an add-on so that
Are you recording these for consumption, or are you just using voice and text to play?
Yeah, we're recording them, but so far we haven't got a good recording that we were able to put. We've done it twice now. We did a Universe Unleashed with Rabo GDM, and then you said you have done actual play, or you haven't done actual play?
Yes, I did actual play with RPGMP3.com.
RPGMP3.com?
Yeah, let me see if I can find a link. I dropped out because, among various reasons, where I live to where they broadcast is an very long distance.
Yeah, there's a problem with time zones in actual play podcasts, and it seems like Friday nights are popular, but Friday nights are definitely not good for Europeans. So I'm trying to encourage DMs to think about Saturday morning games too, where we could play with people across the water.
I'll post up the link to RPGMP3.com. Hal's a buddy of mine. I've gamed with him before. Actually, we did before video was that we did just audio.
Okay, so is that it's a Twitch.
It's a Twitch now. It was originally just a podcast.
Okay.
Hear me now? Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've been doing freestyle jazz in the
I accidentally just knocked out my USB thing for the setup that's got my mic and everything attached to it, and it just totally, Discord just did not like it, but I'm glad it was an easy fix to get back in. I was going to ask, not sure if you answered already, but I was going to ask, are you just using voice and text chat, or are you actually, is it something you're publishing and putting out there on Gamer Plus for other people to watch?
We are recording, but because of technical issues with the recordings on our first two sessions, we did not get a podcast.
So when is the first one of these actual plays going to go up, or are you waiting to get a few of them in the can first?
We're waiting to get a good recording of one of them.
So you just, how many of your actual plays did you record? Just none of them have turned out.
We've done two sessions so far. We did a Universe Unleashed and a Star Wars, and we have two coming up next week, another Universe Unleashed and a Chronicles of Amber. And these are both being run by the people who wrote the systems. Of course, Star Wars was not. My son Kier, a.k.a. Draclor, ran that game and put up a dice roller so that we could have their weird dice. But the Chronicles of Amber is a very dark fantasy role-playing system, and Universe Unleashed is a science fiction system, and it uses, I think, D6 dice pools, if I'm remembering this right. I played it once, and it was been several weeks ago.
So is that your guys' goal, to play a bunch of one-shots for a bunch of different systems and kind of...
It's called If You Play, You Win, is our overarching title for the actual play, and one-shots is what it's about. And jump in and jump out. Try to keep that barrier. No email. Of course, you have to have a Discord account to get on Tanker's Tavern, but no email required to get the pre-gens or on the whiteboard. It's designed to be very low barrier to entry type system that's just talking.
Nice. Do you have people that actually come in and have watched you play on the Discord while you guys have been playing?
Yeah, and we've had people come and jump into the game.
Very cool. What's your schedule? What days? What days or nights are you running?
Again, that's the DM decides. So far, it's been the DM and me. I can see where there'll come a time in the future where I won't have to be there once we get everything set up and flowing more smoothly. But of course, I want to play. So it like I was telling Glenn, it's mostly been Friday nights because they want to do it Friday nights. Next week we have a game coming up on Thursday and Friday, but I'm trying to encourage Saturday morning sometimes so that Europeans could play.
Yeah, that's a good point. Those Friday nights, depending on where you are, can be tough. I know that there's a couple times where I had the opportunity to do stuff, but it was West Coast nights and I'm East Coast, and I thought that's just going to be too late.
I've got some people trying to interview me and some other big names from the Mystara setting. The only problem is I'm in Texas, Harvard's in Norway, and Thorfinn's in Japan.
Yeah. That's a tough schedule to get the three of you.
Yeah. Okay. Who wants to do the interview at 3 a.m? Because one of us is going to have to bite the bullet.
So where do you? Larry, so is the scheduling and everything for that is all up on Gamer Plus? Do you have a Gamer Plus page?
Yeah, there's a if you play you win group.
You want to? Is there a public link that you can drop into the chat?
Oh yeah, let me do that.
So Glenn, you said you had been in a actual play, but I take it it's not something that you do regularly or that you do anymore.
No. There were some factors. Number one was Atascocita to Clear Lake is over 30 miles, and it's still the same city.
Yeah, I knew people in Clear Lake, and yeah, that's a long ride.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not, I know I have to get, like for the Mystara, Keith Baker, the way he got Eberron on was getting people to play the game on popular Twitch streams. That was one of the things that helped. So I know I've got to get it done. I just don't know the people that would be willing to run the game using Twitch. And I don't have the equipment. I can't video stream, but that's something that people like to watch right now.
I'm surprised nobody's reached out to you about doing it. I'm kind of surprised because I know that there's
talking to me about it and actually doing it are two different things. I'm waiting on I think 3 different websites just to get the review out. Somebody mentions it on I forgot who, not the DM doc, but this New Zealand person, he's got like a large channel. He mentioned it, and people and my interest spiked. But I've got to keep it in the public eye, and to do that, I need a regular game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, you got to get a lot of stuff going on. I just know that a lot of people are. I hear a lot about it in different venues, so I'm just surprised that nobody has reached out with more concrete plans yet to run it. Simply because it seems to pop up in people's conversations fairly often that I've seen.
Most of the time it's because people are pushing their own product. Like I got sent a list of people. Like, hey, I've got this book. Would you like to look at it? And he goes, no, because we only review stuff that we do or stuff that we're associated with.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of the people that are reviewing products, they have a financial stake, which, speaking as a journalist, that's a bit unethical, but it's something that happens.
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's weird. Though maybe if it's transparent that, hey, we're just going to talk about stuff that we do and that's cool. If you're coming at it like it's an independent review thing, but behind the scenes, you're just pushing your own products, that would be definitely shady.
But it's something that happens. That's what I've got to find. You've got to find a decent channel. You can't just find people that have like 4 followers. Somebody did it back before there was the final version, but they never got more than 10 people looking at it, which doesn't help.
Yeah, though, the thing is that's nice with all that stuff is it lives, right? So the person that's got 4 followers, when they do it, maybe in a few months they've got 50 followers, maybe in a few months they've got 500 followers, and that content is archived and it's there and they can go back, or people will say, clamor for more, or it turns up in search engines. But yeah, I mean, ideally you want the biggest, buckets of viewers that you can get, but sometimes going out with smaller numbers, but these are people who are enthusiastic and really want to do it and are really, I guess they're engaged enough that they are not only going to talk about doing it, then do it can be valuable.
We had Glenn on our other Gamer Plus podcast, the Ask Me Anything About Gaming segment of Inspired Unreality. And we talked about Mystara and other Glenish stuff. And I put a link.
I like that. Glenish stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of, because of my writing career, I actually am known in multiple circles for various writings.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but there's no crossover between them.
Not yet, but that's where the Vin Diesels and the Matt Mercers of the world help, because you get some of those people who have no inkling about D&D, but they've heard of those guys, or they like, what's his name from True Blood, or Mangiello or whatever, and then suddenly they're interested in the game that had no interest before.
Hopefully that'll do it. But I just, like I said, I write history and I, do theater and, theater reviews. So, actually, there's a lot of gamers in the theater, but it's not exactly an easy cross.
Right. Have you, from people in the theater that that are, aware, are aware that you do gaming stuff? Have you seen any more interest, given that a lot of actors, and I don't know if there's have emboldened people?
A little, but they're mostly involved in theater. That's a hobby. It's not something that drives them.
I'm a leader, student leader in a small group at ASU, and so there's about 5 other musicians in the band, and it turns out they're all gamers. They all play Dungeons and Dragons. Of course, they all play 5e, so I'm the old guy.
Have you been able to get them to play some of your Rules Light system or some OSR gaming?
Not yet. I've just been trying to get them to come to the conventions. Now, some of them know my son, Kier, and my daughter, Megan, and Sarah, who are in the NEA Gamers Guild. So some of them do attend NEA Gamers Guild events, library gameplay, but I didn't see any of them at the convention, so what can I say?
I hear you. Well, everyone's got their levels of comfort and how far they want to go. I've yet to go to a convention, though I want to go. Just, I think I mentioned this in the last time we were talking, that I just feel like New York City doesn't make it necessarily convenient for a lot of the different convention locations. But yeah, it's something that I definitely have interest in.
All right. Shazam!
Your other topic was about scenery and miniatures. Are you someone that likes to play with a lot of physical components in your game?
Well, I've never used them, but I did at Arkansas RPG Con play in a game that used them, and I've played in several other games in the recent past that used them, and it opened a door for me, and that's why I put it in there. I've always been theater of the mind. We either sat around a table, or sometimes not even a table, just sat in the living room in different chairs and write on our own pieces of paper and roll our own dice. But at Arkansas RPG Con, DM Crafty ran a game, and he was running it out of a combination of BX and another old school book. And he had some really amazing.
So what was the door that you felt like having the physical scenery and whatnot open for you? What did it add to the experience that was you felt was missing, or at least was new to you?
Did we lose him?
I mean, like I said, I've only played with this. I've only seen the scenery stuff as far as looking in on Game Workshop, kind of those kind of hobby stores, and it always looks super cool. I have no idea how people, in a game shop, they have everything there. You said you work for Reaper, you used to, so you have tons of miniatures. Do you have some of the scenery stuff as well?
No, for me, scenery gets in the way. If I have to use anything, I'll either dry erase matte or I'll use tiles. You don't want to go 3-dimensional because then you've got stuff in the way between you and the miniatures.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a plus minus, right? Because having the 3-dimensional stuff can really be, you can really visualize that other dimension. And I like the idea of being able to have, say, a stand of trees, and that you can actually look down and kind of get a character eye view of why a character or PC can't see through the trees or whatnot. But yeah, from a usability, practical standpoint, having to reach around and over stuff and do that kind of makes it a little bit less easy to play. But I've only played with basically, minis on a whiteboard or a one of those dry erase mats.
And most of my miniatures I just buy because I want to paint them.
That's the other thing, is I would be I have never painted a mini. It would scare me.
It's not as hard as it looks. You just practice with some. I guess they're slugs, where they're just simple, easy miniatures. They're just like one piece. You don't have to assemble them. And then you just keep practicing.
Oh, there he's back. So I was going to ask you, Larry, what did you, so you said that guy his name was DM Crafty, I guess, ran it with the miniature scenery. What did you feel like the scenery added to you to the experience that you hadn't had before?
Well, his trees were leafless, and they were very spooky like. So you were in like a spooky forest. And he asked me what I was doing. There was a monster coming up, a dinosaur type thing, coming up through the brush. So I took my character and I moved him between the mules and, near the mules and but between them. And I said, well, I calm the mules and stand between them and the dinosaur thing while these other guys were going to fight. And he said, if you hadn't done that, I probably should have asked you to roll to see if they ran away, because here's this big monster coming up. The mules are going to try to run away. So it gives you a placement there.
Did you find that that's something you would not have thought of if it had been Theater of the Mind to go and put yourself, or did you feel like seeing it physically on the board?
Yeah, it helped me see what my job was and what I should be doing or what I would be doing in that situation. I might have thought to do that since that was my task, but it just was visually very helpful. And then he also had a wizard's tower that was made out of a petrified tree, and he worked that all into his mythology. And then he had a climbing wall where it was like you could scale up and down a cliff face.
And he brought all this stuff to the con with him? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. He says his package now is, will it fit in his car? He'll carry whatever will fit in his car. And he makes all his own scenery. So part of it is, appreciating his work, and what he's done. And then I also got interested in miniatures because I bought a monoprice 3D printer, and it was an open box, and it only cost $100. Of course, I went on Thingiverse and started looking at things, and the things that grabbed my eyes were the D&D miniatures. And so I've been printing a bunch of them. And I'm hope to have time to learn to paint a little more, but that's one way to learn to paint without jeopardizing your investment in your miniatures is if you can print your own. They only cost pennies each.
How do you like that? How do you like that 3D printer? I didn't know that Monoprice had one out. Is it?
Yeah, Monoprice has, I think it's their bottom end one is $150, but because it was open box or sale or whatever, I got it for $100. And that's, I've been wanting a 3D printer for a long time, but I didn't want to spend $300 or $400 on one. So $100 was my price point that got me into the hobby. I really like it. Some of the models on Thingiverse, it does not print well, but most of the miniatures it does. And after you use it a while, you can kind of look at the miniature and say, well, it might not do that one because there's too much overhang, So you look for the kind of stubby, self-contained miniatures that are likely to print well. One real cool thing I did was I printed a couple of doors, and there are 3 little parts, and they snap together and the door opens and closes, so that's pretty cool. I still haven't played with scenery myself. I've never run a game with scenery.
Yeah, I watched some of Matt Finch's, I don't know if he's running them anymore, his old school game that he was running through, I don't remember, it was Google Chat or whatever, but he would put them up on YouTube, and he was 3D printing out lots of scenery stuff, the dungeon tiles and whatnot that had walls and had those doors that you could open and close. And he would he must have had a little webcam or something he could position down in there so that seeing it through, I think the same thing his players got, that he could put it and kind of give you here's the party eye view of this corridor with the bends in the corridor and the doors and whatever else. It seemed pretty cool, but it seemed like it was a lot of work. I mean, it seems like it's something that if you enjoy that, it can be really rewarding. And it's almost like you're going to say it's a secondary hobby or a second hobby of getting all that stuff printed. But I'm in a small Brooklyn apartment. There's no way I have space for 3D printers or all that stuff. But it is very cool to see I think he 3D printed all his stuff out. Very cool to see what can be done. And yeah, one day it'll be amazing to be somewhere at con or somewhere else and get to play and all that stuff. But I have to say I'm pretty happy with Theater of the Mind as my original gaming. Though I like Roll20 when I see people using, I know people really like the kind of dynamic lighting and things you can do on Roll20, though it just, I think flat. I don't know if there's they add any kind of depth to the maps you get on Roll20, but sort of just flat maps, but having the kind of dynamic lighting to show and hide stuff as the party's moving along. It's also really cool, I must say. And I think people do some interesting stuff with Tabletop Simulator as far as other 3-dimensional type, but digital mapping and movement.
Yeah, I think playing just on a flat whiteboard and doing your combat, even if you don't have scenery, will help place your characters in a space for combat.
Yeah, the one thing I found is and I'm sure this is kind of group to group, but I think that kind of like the same way that people talk about when you give people a certain set of skills, they may limit themselves to the skills you put. I think sometimes when you're dealing with looking at things on a physical surface, that if you don't put details in, people will just assume that they're not there, versus in theater of the mind, if you say, oh, you're fighting in a tavern, someone might say, okay, well, tables and chairs or whatnot, so I'm going to do that. Whereas if you drew out the tavern on your whiteboard or whatever, but you failed put in tables and chairs, you didn't think about it, people might assume that there are none because they're not on the map. Whereas in the mind, you're going to maybe ask that question of, well, can I jump on a table? And then as the GM, you go, oh yeah, there's probably a table there. You can do that. But if I've mapped it out, then we both look at the map and I think to myself, there's no table there drawn. So I'm not even going to ask if there is a table. And as a GM, I might forget the table's there because I didn't draw it in. So when I look at it, if someone could take cover behind a table, I'm like, oh, there's no table there because I didn't draw it in there.
Yeah. Theater of the mind has advantages, and that's the way I've always played. I did get to play in a Stefan Picorni game at North Texas using the Dwarven Forge 3D stuff, and it was very exciting. And I enjoyed that. And then my son Carl runs low-end scenery made out of little wood blocks, and he's painted them and stuff, and he's got doors. And I found that to be helpful visualizing and what he does is, instead of uncovering, he builds as he goes. So he's got a map that he's building out in front of you, and when you enter the room, then that room gets built out with its doors and scenery, whatever, maybe a treasure chest or whatever in there. It was interesting. I've never done it before this year, but I may try to DM with some scenery sometime.
I mean, it's really cool. I think the stuff is neat. Part of it is just, for me, it's just been the necessity being the mother of invention. I've never had the kind of setup or space to have that stuff. So we just did with what we had. But I could definitely see that for different situations, sometimes having the stuff all there. And let's face it, depending on what rules you're playing and how you're playing, 5th edition, 4th edition for sure. 5th edition uses lots of measurements for things that are handy to use with physical layouts that are easier to grok, easier to keep everyone on the same page when you can lay it out physically and visually in front of someone, than sometimes dealing with theater of the mind. I was used to kind of be the kind of hand wavy sort of, let's just roll some dice. Oh, I'm going to fire this at a bunch of goblins, and okay, we'll just roll X amount of dice to see how many goblins happen to be in that blast. Some people are fine with that. They roll with it. Other people are like, no. I want to place it exactly to get X amount of goblins, and then being able to have all the goblins out where you can look at them and look at your, whatever you use to measure the radius of the fireball or whatever. And then we all get on the same page as far as what all that means. The physical, having a physical visual representation helps a lot.
I played in a ocean or seagoing quest at North Texas, and it was 5e. And so we were all counting those little squares and all that, and the boats all had little squares on them and stuff like that. But of course, at the end, there was a kraken. I got to stand on the head of the kraken and start stabbing him in the eyes and stuff. And it was, visually seeing my character standing there on the head of the kraken did add something to it. That said, I love Theater of the Mind. I'll probably always prefer Theater of the Mind,
especially if you have a badass kraken mini that you can bust out.
Yeah, he had that cool stuff. He had 2 boats, and he had seafaring boats, and he had a kraken where the head would stick out, and then he could move the tentacles around separately and all that. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, those are nice. I bet you that did not cost a small amount of money either. I feel like you can spend a lot of money on minis and all that stuff once you get going.
Or a lot of time, or both. He did both. He bought some stuff, and he printed some stuff to make changes. He'd buy cheap toys and then turn them into really cool Dungeons and Dragons boats and stuff. DM Crafty, I think he builds all of his scenery. That's a whole construction hobby in itself,
Absolutely. Is it something that he was selling as well, or is this just his hobby, just for himself and his own games that he runs?
Just his hobby. He's a computer programmer by trade.
All right.
He just likes to run games, and he likes to build scenery.
Very cool.
All right. Shazam!
Let's see. Were there any other topics we had? Is there anything else? Glenn, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about for the 20-so minutes that we have left?
I mean, not really. It's just, there's really not all the topics I have would probably take up half an hour or more, probably more. Just trying to tweak the different games, or talking about, the difficulty of putting this book together, and the fact that I'm still finding errors, though they're not as many.
So what kind of errors are you finding? Is it more the typo variety or the mechanical variety?
So originally, it was just, after we got the book printed, I found about 20 plus formatting errors, which didn't know there were going to be formatting errors until I got the book printed.
Yeah, that's one of those things, right? I had a friend of mine who's a graphic designer, and he used to work for it was a magazine. It was called Paper City. I'm not sure if it's still there. He the one in Houston. It was the Houston edition of Paper City, and he would, it was one of those things that on those print days, he would basically pull an all-nighter at the printer because they would print a proof and then may have to make adjustments. And this is something, that he is particularly, after he'd been doing a little bit, the layout and the printer and everything, he's very intimately familiar with, and yet still you have to spend that process going through it and finding last minute stuff and fixing it. So it's definitely something that is a thing for people who work on those kind of products.
Vivian's her career before she retired, she's a professional proofreader and copy editor, so that's wonderful for me. And we proof each other's work, and we co-write too, so we are in fact ending up proofing and editing our own text. So that's not the best situation, but at least there's two of us. And one of the terms that I think is rather funny is the post-printing editing, where you look at your printing and it's your justification looks way off and all that, so you reword something to make the printout look better.
I mean, there's totally, you do that, or you have like hanging chads of like, oh, this paragraph just kind of falls, so now you're trying to cut that paragraph to make it
doesn't really fit right, so you have to take something out.
Yeah, the widows and orphans. I'm saying, when I was working on the fixing the initial one, somebody asked me, what are you yelled at from across another room? And he goes, what are you doing? He goes, I'm killing widows and orphans. He goes, God, I hope you're talking about, editing.
Yeah, whenever I have to do that, I am very careful to make sure that the text is actually better. Yeah, besides looking better, I want it to actually read better.
Yeah, because it says now you're changing it. Now you got to go reread and give it another, proofread editing pass to make sure that the few things you didn't cut out to get rid of that orphan or widow isn't the thing that made the whole paragraph make sense. But Glenn, you feel like the mechanics are pretty sound at this point, or at least as far as what you want out of it?
I know people aren't going to like it because I kept out things that I don't like out of the book, which is like, well, I want to play a barbarian. Well, then take a fighter with the Outlander background, because since the setting is analogies of real world settings, I'm not going to call an entire race of people a barbarian. But I mean, most of the problems, the one thing I wish I had, which just the layout software that I'm using isn't capable of, I wish I could snap the text tighter to the art rather than the square around it.
What software are you using?
Lucid.
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's not the best, but the price was right. And now I'm kind of regretting I should never ever get the software rentals where you have to pay the monthly subscription fee to use it. Find one that you can buy outright.
Yeah, there is. I'll try to remember it. There is one. I think it's by Affinity. I will drop the link in there. I think it's called, I don't remember what it is, but they have one that I think it's still in beta. You might be able to get it for free. I don't know at what point it goes, but they are not a subscription model. They are a just pay to use model.
I was told to get Xara, Xara. That's supposed to be a really good one.
Is that a free one also, or just one
no,
pay?
It's money. Yeah, but it's $60, not $20 a month for 3 years, which is substantially more than $60.
Yeah, I use LibreOffice and GIMP, and both are free software, and I run on a Linux system, so I'm sure that there are better, but they work for what I'm doing, so I'm using LibreOffice and GIMP.
Yeah, there's also stuff like LaTeX and various things, though I think I know people use it for lots of things. For things I think they're super graphic heavy that like game books tend to be, I'm not sure they work the best. It seems like they work really well for text, because it originally was all about textbooks and like mathematical texts and doing all that stuff. It's actually, you can do a lot with it, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's user friendly anyway, but it's, it's free. There's a link to Affinity Publisher. I haven't used that one myself, but I actually have it. I just haven't had a chance to dig into it yet. But I think it's either free right now in the beta or it's paid. I think it's pretty much got the feature set that you'd expect in a competitor to something like InDesign, Adobe's entry in there.
Since I'm publishing mini zines and all the pages are little tiny 2 3/4 by 4.5, I tend to go with just plain text and with, when I can, black and white artwork.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you could also use something like GIMP if it's not very many pages, and if it's just like
I use GIMP.
Do that.
GIMP and LibreOffice, and they both output PDFs, so I have the PDFs to distribute, and everything I do is available on the internet, free download as a PDF, and then you can print it and fold your own mini-zine out of it.
I don't like that everything's moving to a subscription model. I get it from a certain standpoint, but a lot of these things are not where you're constantly making updates, or that you're engaging in cloud storage or things that cost money. Word processor, I don't need a ton of updates. And if things you're updating that much stuff is kind of broken that needs fixing, fixing, then I feel like that you're cheating by having me pay at all. Fix the stuff that's broken. If you have, save up, you want to improve it, great. Have yearly improvements and do that. Don't try to get me onto pay X amount of dollars per month just for something that's essentially just a static piece of software. It kind of drives me nuts for some stuff. I'm kind of on, I do the Adobe stuff right now because I use that a lot for different things, but I would love to get off of that and get into just paying for the software that I want or using the free ones. I'm getting pretty close. And that's kind of why I downloaded the Affinity version, though I haven't had a chance to try yet, is to see if there was something I could get off of using InDesign. The InDesign is really nice. Because I when I first was doing layout, I was using Quark Express. I don't even know if they're still around, but it was such a slog. And from going there from InDesign, it was like going from a Gutenberg printing press to a modern printer. It felt so freeing, but I'm definitely ready for some alternatives that can do. And I'm not even someone that does like a lot of crazy stuff in InDesign. I really just need to do the core stuff and do it well.
The subscription model makes sense for a corporation who's paying someone $50,000 a year to sit at that desk, then that $120 a year or even $240 a year to keep them on the latest version and without problems and keep them working is well worth it. But for an individual who's, on a hobby or a small business, doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, I mean, when you have programs that either they take a lot of updates or they're doing a lot of customizations, and you have kind of a user support angle, which is what a lot of corporate contracts have, is so much customization, so much end user support, so that, like, you're right, we can keep them running. But a lot of this stuff doesn't have that. When you buy in the Adobe one, you're not getting any kind of customer support. You're really just getting access to the software. And a lot of these, they're not offering any of the stuff that corporations would get out of their kind of corporate contract. It's really about, and I get it, it's about supporting, it's an interesting thing, right? Because you spend $60, the company gets your $60, and then they have to justify you spending any more money with that, which I think from a consumer standpoint is good. Yeah, you justify me spending more money and I'll spend it. I think their standpoint is, hey, we've made this product and now you can support us over time, which gives us that kind of steady income which is better than getting it all up front. And as Glenn pointed out, you tend to spend more. That $60 once, even if it's a low price per month, you tend to end up spending more money over time. But I think that a lot of the software that has subscription models don't justify the subscription part because they're not engaging resources on their end constantly. They're not doing things like supporting me or customizing my experience in a way that I'm engaging them on any meaningful level over time. I really just have this one bit of software I've downloaded once that I've unlocked, and then I'm just using it. So why is it tied to a subscription? Like, what is the subscription part am I getting out of it other than just sending them money once a month? Obviously
good for them.
Yes, good for them, not so great for us. And like I said, for certain things, it makes sense. If it's someone that's utilizing servers and cloud and all that kind of stuff, then you have to, if you're using their servers, they have to pay their servers. It makes sense that you kind of chip in for server use. But if I'm just downloading it to me and it's just like a word processor, it's not engaging anything of their servers just other than me downloading it, which I did once, then why am I, like, what am I getting over those 6 months that I'm paying for it? Like, just give me a flat fee, whatever you think it's worth, and then I can see if I want to buy it or not. Somewhere they'll come to a happy medium, I think, because I feel like it's gotten a little bit crazy, and I almost think that some people are going back to non-subscription models because it does set them apart from the subscription ones. And I think people have seen that there's a little bit of pushback now on everything trying to be subscriber-based.
There's definitely pushback.
Cool. Well, I guess we can just, we got a couple minutes, but I don't think there's much to talk about that we could fit into 6 minutes. I don't think there's too much going on in the chat today, but if anyone has a quick question, they can drop it in there. Otherwise, we can get some last plugs from everyone, and then we can call it a day and enjoy the rest of our Sunday. Glenn, do you want to plug any last stuff posted in the threads? You want to put any links to where people can find you?
Yeah, this is my Welcome to Mystara /Mad Musings channel. I'm about to do a new video today about the influence of Ashton Clark Smith into the setting, and I just recently reviewed The World of Cinnabar. If you want to experience a lot of role-playing pain, because that game is an endurement contest.
That's funny. I actually just read. I've been going back and reading some Clark Ashton Smith, and I just read a story. It was really weird because it was set up like the whole story was basically what would have been a great beginning to a story. It's a guy, he had left his family and gone out into the world. I guess he was kind of sick of them, but he hadn't been successful at all, and he was kind of with his tail between his legs, was going back to this family that he had abandoned. He's going down, he's just walking alongside the highway. I think the time frame, I guess, must be late 19th century, turn of the century kind of thing. And he's walking on his road, and he's getting close to home, and he's smelling the remains of a forest fire, I guess, which is very apropos of what we've been experiencing in the real world these last few years. And now he's getting a little bit concerned because he's getting near towards his tract of land, and it looks like this fire just blazed through everything. He gets to his house, and he sees, but it seems like his house has been unharmed, and there's a woman, and I think there's 2 kids, but he doesn't know where his son is. He doesn't see his son there, but he goes in, and I think he even talks to the wife or something, and then he gets knocked out. And then when he wakes up, he's surrounded by ash, and one of the neighbors has found him, has explained to him how his family died in the fire, right? It's one of those kind of like, I don't know, sort of definitely made me feel like a Rod Serling Twilight Zone kind of thing. But then the story just ends. It's kind of this, that's it. Like, haha, they were dead all along. And he hadn't even done anything yet. I was like, that's the story? The guy he just falls asleep, wakes up, and it's like, I run credits. It was just struck me as like very weird in that way.
He had a lot of stuff that started out normal, then had a surprise twist, supernatural ending, even if he had to ass pull it.
But I mean, it's like, the funny thing is like that there was just nothing had happened yet. It's like I was expecting like either he goes in the house and does a lot of stuff, but like literally it was just that he sees the family and then he blacks out, and like that's it. Like the whole story was the twist. Like there was no plot really or anything. It was like, wow, just somebody took the beginning of a Twilight Zone, I guess, in the end, and just cut out the whole middle of the episode where they actually find some kind of self-discovery or something through this thing. Like like was it incident at whatever creek where the guy, the whole thing takes place between being hung, but there's no actual, sorry, spoilers for the what is it, the beer story or the Twilight Zone episode from 50 years ago, but it's just weird. It's like cut out all that stuff and it's just the end. So it was interesting. Let's see, Larry, you got any last things you want to plug? Anything you want to say before we call it?
Yeah, this is my minizines.cc site where I post the Milligan quests, and I will post my Just Quest gaming system once I get it finished. And I also have coloring books, art books, short stories, different kinds of stuff I've written or public domain stuff. And then also at Gamer Plus, we're starting a new project next year that will be a podcast kind of related to Geeks podcast, but it will be a book club, and we'll all read a book like in a book club and then discuss that book as a podcast. It'll be science fiction or fantasy books, and that'll be starting in January on Gamer Plus. So there's a link to that if you want to put some input into what books you want to read.
I haven't been able to check out Gamer Plus a lot, but I'm now signed up, so maybe I'll take part in some of that stuff. But I'll just wrap it up here. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Larry, for hanging out with me this morning. I always enjoy the chat. Just everybody have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thanks, Todd.
And back to the theater reviews now.